Hello, what's up, Strong Nation? Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back again. We're talking about conservation, talking about seagrass. I have two amazing guests. Justin is here with me. Anytime we talk about conservation, Justin joins. He spent a lot of time working with grass in college. I know that came out wrong, but Justin did spend a lot of time in college and even after college, working with SeaWorld and all kinds of different places. We can talk about that a little bit. And then I got Katie Kramer, who is came from my friend Michelle there at the Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida. And Katie also works with seagrass and restoration. And you guys have been doing some really cool stuff for, I believe, like multiple decades. So welcome to the show. Start with you, Katie. What's the background of this company? Tell us who you are and what you guys do and how you're saving the world from a lack of seagrass.
We're trying. So I've been with Scene Shoreline for about 3 years, which isn't a fantastically long time, but I have learned so much here. Scene Shoreline was born in 2015, really with the mission of just trying to improve our habitat with a huge focus on seagrass. Our founder is from Ruskin, and he was actually a sod farmer, and they were going to close down the local boat ramps due to some local seagrass damage that had been going on in Cockroach Bay. And being the angler and skier and waterman that he is, he said, absolutely not. You're not shutting my boat ramp down. So
Hmm.
he was like, I'll fix it. We'll grow some seagrass. He dug a hole in his sod farm, planted some seagrass, and got it to grow. And that's where Scene Shoreline started. So we started, very humble beginnings, and now we've become, a pretty premier and top level private aquatic restoration firm in the state of Florida, and we're looking to branch out into some other states.
Too cool. I did not know that backstory.
Yes,
We've spent a lot of time there at Cockroach Bay, so we have you guys to thank for that with the grass there.
absolutely.
Too cool. So what are the current projects you're working on now? I assume there's something going on in the River Lagoon, which is why Michelle had reached out. Talk about what you guys are doing. We've had some prior podcasts talking about the lagoon in particular. Justin, you fished there for, many, many years. I have as well. Luke lived on there for quite some time. And there's clearly a decline. In some areas, it's just what used to be lush seagrass is completely gone. A lot of people want to point fingers. As a lot of our past guests have said, it's not any one person or, there's not one group that's just responsible for all of it. There's a lot of factors. Talk about what you guys are seeing as the problem and how the heck do you go about fixing a project like that? That's pretty big.
Sure. The Indian River Lagoon is a hot subject right now, and there's a lot going on. Like you said, the lagoon is, I think it's 156 miles long. It covers 40% of Florida's east coast, so it's a big deal, and it's really hard to get all of these groups in different counties and local stakeholders on board to pursue projects that are going to make everybody happy and address everybody's specific needs, because it's really just a geographically huge area to address. But what we're seeing is a culmination of many things that are happening in the lagoon, and when it happens on such a large scale, it's hard to address with, say, like small pilot scale projects. So our recent methodologies have focused on big projects and having large scale impacts. So in the past, we've done a couple smaller pilot scale projects just to prove, like, hey, we can get grass to grow in here. There's always the chicken or the egg debate. Do we try to plant seagrass to improve water quality, or do we wait to improve water quality first so that we can ensure that seagrass is going to be successful? We say, let's plant it now. Seagrass creates this positive feedback loop, whereas when it's in an area, it creates conditions that further allow for the success of seagrass. So we say, if we can get it in and get it to survive, we absolutely want to plant it. So we've done a couple demonstration projects to show, hey, we can, do it in this area, in the southern, middle, and northern portions of the lagoon. But right now, our biggest project is working on these tributaries to the lagoon. To these tributaries feed water into the lagoon, and our thought process there is that if we can improve the water quality coming into the lagoon and start creating, a seed source and a food source and a habitat for those upstream species, it's only going to have positive effects downstream once that water gets to the lagoon. So that's what we're focusing on now, is replanting and repopulating those areas to bring benefits to the lagoon overall.
Justin, you're dying to ask something. I know it.
No. It makes perfect sense because it's essentially you're creating the filtration system at the source, right? So I think it's funny. A close friend of mine, Ty Nelson, he runs a company called Florida Fishing Products. We talked about this 6-7 years ago and said, man, what I don't think a lot of homeowners, stakeholders, people throughout Florida stop to look at is the start and progression of water. Where does it start? Where does it enter into the lagoon system? How does it's not just the bulk part of the river. If we're talking about headwaters and entry points where, we have our foundation of the state and water naturally filtering its way through, but that source where water is entering through a tributary into the main part of the river, if you essentially put like a filter pad, for lack of better expression, like your seagrass, your natural means of filtration, then what then is being introduced into the main waterway is then a naturally filtered supply. So, there's other studies being done by other companies looking at the nutrient content being introduced into the river system from these tributaries. And the different areas have hotspots, if you will, right? Some have high nutrient output and some low. And it seems like that would probably be part of the target, is to introduce a natural means of filtration at these areas to help ensure that you're giving back to allow the river to recover. And that makes perfect sense. And I think that's just it's something I chatted about with my friend a long time ago, but to see action being taken in those areas, that those are the hotspots, the entry points, it's so valid. It's very cool.
Absolutely, yeah. I love that you're saying like a nature or natural based filter, because that's exactly what seagrass is, and that it's kind of a new subject that people are approaching and realizing it can be a literal filter. Seagrass not only absorbs nutrients, but it absorbs carbon as well, and it traps both of those, the nutrients and the carbon, in its sediments by its roots and rhizomes holding sediments in place, but also in its tissues, and it can physically remove that from the water column. So it's not just uptake through the sediment, because there's a lot of like nutrient laden legacy muck in the Indian River Lagoon, but also it can pull that directly out of the water column. And that is so awesome to be able to use this natural solution of a plant that should be there and has historically been there and has so many other benefits, to use that as a filter for that impaired water coming into an already impaired system.
So when you guys did some of your testing, is the biggest problem, is it some of the muck? Is it like finding a good place to plant it? Is it obviously the manatees come in, I've heard sometimes, and can rip it up before it really gets a chance to set root? Is it the bad water? Is it boaters with props? Like what is the problem that you guys like, the bigger issue? And then two, how do you fix that? I saw a video you guys did in the past where you essentially had like little, like almost like gates over on top of it to prevent sea turtles and manatees and other things from coming and getting it. What do you guys see in there in terms of the bigger problems to scale this sucker out?
So the answer to the first part of your question is yes. All of the above have been things, hurdles that we have had to jump over. And the first step to mitigating for some of that is site selection. So we can go out, do a site visit and say, okay, this spot is nice and shallow. So even though, sure, there's a ton of algae in the water and light availability may be impaired, it's going to be way better here, maybe say closer to an inlet versus up in the Banana River Mosquito Lagoon area. So we look for that. Muck has been a huge issue, finding that appropriate sediment, because like you said, if we go out, plant an area, even if it's shallow, say it does have good water quality, but that sediment is super soft, those plants are going to have a really hard time taking root in that sediment. And without protection, a manatee can come along, turtles, fish. We like to say if you plant it, they will eat it. Everything eats seagrass. So if it's in that really soft sediment, it can't grab on. So as soon as something comes along to eat it, it gets pulled right out of the ground versus just having the blades, grazed on, and then the plant can remain and flourish. So definitely site selection plays a huge role, and we just have to weigh our options in choosing, for sediment, light, water depth, and even like you said, boaters. we do try to mark out where we plant these areas so that they're protected. There's no sense in us going to plant an area and then just allowing it to get run over by boaters. So we're very aware of, boat traffic, channel locations, history with, say prop scars, boat injuries, things like that. And then you mentioned our cages. Their full technical name is Grow SAV or Vivary Exclusion Devices.
Whoa.
And yes. So that's what they do. They exclude herbivores of all kinds. From manatees, we've had sea urchins, fish, crabs. We've had cows come down from pasture to graze on our freshwater grasses. So everything eats it. But we use those devices to protect the grass for a period of a couple months to a year to allow it to get established to the point where it can be healthily grazed on without being pulled out of the ground by, say, a large herbivore. And those have been our best friend. Those have definitely helped us get grass established in areas that has a high number of herbivores, like Crystal River. It's the manatee hotspot of the state. There's, I think, 1,000 residential manatees that live there year round. And those devices played a huge role in us, allowing us to be successful there.
In terms of the scalability of it, you mentioned like going and kind of cherry picking the best spots, which makes sense. And you hopefully over time get to do that more and more. But when you're picking a spot, like in one of the ones that you guys are doing now, how big of an area is it? Is it, are we talking a couple 100 feet, a mile? I have no idea. How big can you guys scale this?
Right. So currently our typical like demonstration pilot scale size is about 2 acres. And that gives us about 50 of those devices to plant. They each get 5 plants, and we, maintain and monitor that for a period of a couple of years. But what we're going for now is something larger, say between 20 and 25 acres to several hundred acres. And basically the condition that we're putting on that is if there was seagrass here and we can demonstrate that there's been a loss, then we should be able to go in and restore that area. And I think between 2009, which was the year of the highest seagrass coverage in the Indian River Lagoon, to the last survey that was done in 2021, there's 70,000 acres of loss in the lagoon. And that's all up for grabs, basically. And that's what we're looking to go for.
And do you guys have to dredge some of this, I assume, muck and stuff out? Like what's the whole process look like from start to finish?
In certain areas we do. So we haven't done that historically in the Indian River Lagoon, but there are other companies and projects that are removing that nutrient-laden muck from areas like canals, just to help like physically remove the nutrients from the system. But in other areas, we have certainly done that where we've dredged to remove, the muck and pour sediment to get down to a healthy sediment, and then we have planted that. So in Crystal River, we have dredged and planted over 90 acres there, and that grass has been able to naturally expand to over 200. And in Homosassa, I think we've done over 20. And it's a very similar process where we'll dredge to remove that muck and come behind and plant in a much healthier sediment that allows that grass to be successful.
Good. What you got, Justin?
Well, that's kind of what I was going to ask was about the term is nutrient laden muck. Is that what it is?
Correct.
So when you're dredging it, you're pulling it out entirely. I mean, you're kind of stirring up and sifting the bottom. That's gonna, all water flows downriver, if you will. And removing it entirely is the mitigation, because you need that healthy source to be able to plant the grass. What I wanted to ask was the types of seagrass. So you said freshwater grass, I think is what I heard you say. I'm familiar with freshwater eelgrass, which does have a pretty high Urohaline scale, can tolerate almost full strength seawater, but does really well in 2 parts, 5 parts. And then there's other types. There's widgeon grass, there's shoal grass, there's turtle grass. What type of grass for these upcoming projects in these tributaries in the Indian River are you looking to introduce?
I told you Justin knew a lot about grass. I told you.
Yes, you're hitting me with some data here. So for those projects specifically, we're planting two kinds of grass. One is the eelgrass that you mentioned, which we like to say is a salt tolerant freshwater species, and it can absolutely handle a little bit of salt for a little while, and bursts of higher salinity closer to regular seawater for a shorter amount of time. But because those areas, there's such a fluctuation in salinity, so we chose a salt tolerant freshwater grass and then a freshwater seagrass species, which is Rupia maritima. That's the widgeon grass that you just mentioned. And it's one of our favorite grasses ever. It's so versatile. It's so fast growing. It's a prolific seeder. We love using it in our restoration projects because it's a hardy grass. We have planted that grass in absolute freshwater and in an area that is almost twice the salinity of normal salt water. It's at a nuclear power plant in their cooling canal, which is more turbid than the Indian River Lagoon. The water is over 100 degrees constantly, and it's 70 parts per thousand salinity, and it does extremely well there.
That's
So
harsh.
those are the two grasses that we're planting in the Indian River Lagoon tributaries.
So to put into perspective, Joe, like full strain seawater would be like 33, 34 parts.
This was
Freshwater
70.
is 0.
Mhm.
You said 70. Like
Mhm.
you would float. Like
That's why we love Rupia. It can handle that swing, and it does amazingly well in that area.
that's crazy.
That is wild. Are you guys, with just technology these days, you'd mentioned all these different types of grass. Are you finding other ways to kind of supercharge it, like putting Miracle Grow on the grass to make this just grow so much faster than the old school natural organic way?
Kind of. We do have, and I don't want to use the word fertilizer, so it has a name. It's called SAGE, SAGE, and that stands for Sediment Amending Growth Enhancer. And basically, it's a growth hormone for seagrass, and we can inject that directly into the sediment, so it doesn't affect surrounding waters. It doesn't contribute to any turbidity or nutrient spikes, anything like that. It goes directly into the sediments, and it actually doesn't have any nutrients in it. It's just a growth hormone. But we found that that really helps kick off the seagrass growth, and we'll do that during our maintenance events. So when we're going out to check on our cages and clean off biofouling, check on the health and growth of the seagrass, we'll also apply the sage to help kind of jumpstart it. But I find in most cases there's plenty of latent nutrients for our grasses to
That's
be
true.
successful.
I think a good term for you guys to use, because no one, to your point, wants to hear fertilizer in our water because we don't need any
Right.
more, is some type of environmentally great steroids. Everyone likes steroids these days, so like just yeah,
It
we just
is,
give
it's a
we
seagrass
just give them some
steroid.
steroids. Yeah, seagrass steroids. I like it. Oh, too cool. Justin, what was the one group it was Orca, right? And
Yeah.
were they in the tributaries, or what? Was it more the residential canals where they were
Yeah.
seeing all the craziness, or was it both?
So they're using their Kilroy units and they're just monitoring nutrient levels of different types of nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen. They're checking a lot of different factors. I've seen a couple throughout Sykes Creek and Indian River because I'm just like, I know Merritt Island very well. We were talking about that earlier. And they were locating hotspots where there were excessive nutrient output in particular areas, and they literally mapped it out on a color chart showing like these areas are areas of concern or areas of interest, where we need to understand why is there a higher nutrient content in these particular residential canals, tributaries, whatever we want to call them, as opposed to some other areas that have a softer color like blue. Oh, the nutrient output's not is not alarmingly high. Then they have their rate like parts per million of whatever each one is.
And why? What
Right.
would
I think
that?
they've
Yeah, go for it. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna add, I think they've got those stations in every tributary to the lagoon. So we just completed our installation in three of those areas last week, and we saw Orca staff on their boats at those stations everywhere we went.
Cool. Yeah, they're good people. But where I'm going with this is, I remember on that podcast and some of the comments, there were some people, I don't know if they have any background at all, or this is just their opinion, but to their point, you kind of touched on earlier, Katie, it's like they're like, well, this water is so bad and it's so polluted that it doesn't make sense to plant grass. It's just going to die. But you guys are seeing some success, it sounds like. And even I went to your site earlier. and it says you guys are a private company, you guarantee it, which, you know, it's not like you're just hoping and praying. You guys have a lot to lose. So talk about that. And you, like I said, you kind of touched on it earlier, but you guys seem pretty confident that you can make these grass projects work, not just short term, but long-term sustainability.
Absolutely. So like I said earlier, site selection is a huge thing for us. And what we've done specifically in the lagoon is go after, say, the low-hanging fruit, a site close to Fort Pierce Inlet. It's right there, Fort Pierce Inlet State Park, great water quality, really good sediment. Of course, we can get grass to grow there. That project was successful. Then we went after a site in the Banana River. I think it's just south of 520. We all know what that looks like down there. We got grass to grow there too. And like you said, you know, we do guarantee our grass, and I've adopted this new thought of hope is not a strategy, right? So we're not just going out there, putting our grass in the ground and hoping that it will work or hoping for the best. We go out there and we guarantee it every month, hot or cold, rain or shine. We're out there checking on the grass, making sure that it's looking good, that it's successful. And if it's not, we figure out why. You know, we figure out what we can do, what happened, what's going on to address that and make sure that these projects are successful, because it's, you know, it's not just for us, it's not just for us to be successful as a company, but we see the bigger picture, and that the lagoon is vital and it needs this work to be successful. And we know that the work that we're doing and the projects that we take on are only going to, you know, provide one, direct benefits, but two, it helps research best methods without a lot of the red tape and hoops that you were talking about earlier. We can go out there and plant the grass and say, hey, you know, this worked here, but it didn't work in this area. And that helps our partners, you know, make informed decisions to have the most successful projects, because we don't work alone. We don't work in a bubble. We work with so many groups in the lagoon, and we all have, you know, the same end goal. So that's why we, you know, do our best to make sure that these projects are successful.
And so this one, you guys, private company, you've also got FWC, obviously, and then I heard CCA as well on this one in particular. Or?
For this project, for the tributaries, it is FWC who did the permitting and project design, and then it's the Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida, as well as ourselves, that put forward some of the money to get the work done.
Got it. Got it. I thought I saw CCA in the email for some reason.
CCA is coming out next week. We're going to have some volunteers helping us plant the North Fork of the St. Lucie River.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Is this something that you guys are looking for volunteers, or is it a little bit tougher to get on the scene because you guys all have it buttoned down?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard with volunteers because a lot of what we do, I personally consider dangerous. Those cages are big and they're heavy, and we load several of them up on a shallow draft vessel and drive around for miles to install them. But if the right opportunity presents itself, like it did for the North Fork, then we love having volunteers out there. We love having people see what we do. We get stopped all the time. People asking, you know, what are you trapping? Are you going out for crabs? And we're like, no, it's seagrass. And they're like, what?
We're trapping
So
beavers out here, kids.
yeah, yeah. They're
Yes.
like, are you trapping manatees? And I'm like, why would we be trapping manatees? And a manatee could never fit in here.
Catch every crab in a 5
Yes. Yes.
acre.
So
That's funny.
I love when people are able to come out and see what we're doing and look at the plants and watch us put them in the ground and get a chance to ask us questions directly, because it can be a very abstract thing. They're like, well, why are you planting seagrass and how and what does it look like? And you know, what are you doing about all of this? So I love getting the chance to talk to people and having them come out and actually see, you know, what we're doing, because to them, we show up, we do our installation, and now there's these big metal things in the water that they have to watch out for. So it's really important for us to be able to talk to, you know, community stakeholders and residents about what we're doing, so they see the benefit of it too. Like I said, there's so many partners that go into this work, and people on the front lines are the residents and stakeholders that live in that area that are, you know, going to be most affected by it.
How long is this particular project? Is there even an end date, or is it just keep going?
Keep going. We're going to have the devices in the water for a year. and we'll do maintenance on them monthly. So maintenance involves us going out, cleaning the cages of any biofouling, algae, anything that may be growing on them, taking water quality samples, checking on the health of our grass, and then replanting as needed. And we'll do that for a period of a year. But we have projects that have been in place for 5 or 6 years, and we still have to go visit them, make sure that they're doing good, and kind of see, okay, the grass is still here. What did we do here that worked really well? So we'll be back in these areas all the time.
Too cool. Justin, you got anything else besides asking about more about the sod steroids that you
No, being that you've expressed it that Scene Shoreline's a for-profit company, and the approach of your site selection needs to be, you're saying like we need to guarantee that this is going to be successful. In the grand scheme of things, like I've always looked at, I kind of have an equation like you guys have to look at, like we need to go into this knowing that we can make this work. Otherwise we'd be spinning our wheels and it wouldn't take root. It wouldn't be successful. We can't dredge this area that has too much nutrient laden sediment. I've always looked at it as an equation. I've told Joe this many times. Success is preparation plus luck. All we can do is prepare. All you can do is be calculated and prepare and assess all possible outcomes. It's still nature. Like we don't own and control nature. We understand it more and more and more every day. But at the end of the day, it's still nature. It's still its own wild thing that there could be things that happen that are out of our control. But what is within our control is to take into consideration all the possible elements and variables, look at it, dissect it, and say, is this worthwhile moving forward? And that's what you guys are doing. You're looking at it and observing and say, all right, is this worthwhile? Should we go into this place and plant grass? What grass? How much of an area? What are the steps that go into it? I want to make sure that you're almost end gaming it and saying, is this worth moving forward with? And Joe, you said that on a previous podcast, some of the comments that had come through were from people that said, I guess their concern was, why even put forth the effort? I think their perspective was that some areas are doomed to fail. Well, yeah, don't do those areas. Like any scientist would look at the situation and say, is this worthwhile of planting seagrass or being kind of like just an area to do a project in? Or are there more viable areas to do that in? The site selection side of things, I think everybody takes that into consideration. That needs to be the first thing you look at before you go in and you just introduce a plant or a means of filtration or anything to help better the ecosystem. We're not throwing a dart. It's all well thought through. So those are my thoughts.
Absolutely, yeah. I love what you said, that nature is still going to be nature, and we can do everything we can. We can be as prepared as we can possibly be, and then we'll get smacked with a tropical storm or a category 4 hurricane. So that's certainly happened to us. We've planted an area in Fort Pierce called Moore's Creek. It's another tributary to the lagoon. Less than 30 days after installation, it was hit with a tropical storm. We have over 20 acres in the Caloosahatchee River that was just hit with Hurricane Ian. So like you said, we do everything we can, but nature is still going to be nature. And as we say, we guarantee our projects and our success, but there's a lot of battles that we have to fight to ensure that. I'm trying to think of what else you said and I had a finishing thought, but it's escaped me.
Oh, just site selection. I'm just reiterating the importance of site selection that you keep preaching. And it was an acknowledgement to those that I think expressed their concerns about, like, why even bother? The water's so bad, it's not going to recover. It's like, well, not with that attitude, it's not, like
Exactly.
yeah,
Okay, so I remembered. So, you say, why now? Why now? And it's like, well, we were trying to do this 5 or 6 years ago, and we have gotten laughed out of rooms because people are like, why would you want to plant in this water? There's no way the grass will succeed. There's no way it'll grow. Everything's dead. There's no point in putting more grass out there for it to just die. But we pick the low hanging fruit. We pick those perfect sites to show grass can come back, and it needs the help. Like you were saying earlier, there have been some areas where there's been natural recovery or improvement, and we find that that's ephemeral, and that just means sometimes it's here and then it goes away, and it moves around nothing. is too permanent. So we're finding that this supplemental planting is absolutely needed to get the seagrass communities reestablished in these areas where they were historically. And we'll go after those areas first, and then we can initiate that natural spread.
Awesome. And like you said, I mean, who knows what happens if you just start with a few acres at a time and all of a sudden that starts clearing up some water on that and just starts spreading. It's pretty neat. Really cool the fact that you guys have tried it in a couple bad areas. That's how Tony Robbins got started. He's like, give me your worst patients. I'm gonna fix them up. And some he couldn't do anything with. Some people just didn't want the help. But you guys are doing some cool stuff. As I said, I love the fact that we got some great nonprofits, like obviously all your partners that you guys get to work with, because they help raise a lot of money and get the funds and the grants to do this. And you got someone who's for profit that can get there and just get some stuff done. And that's seems like a pretty cool partnership. So where can everyone go learn more about you guys?
We have our website, sceneshoreline.com, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram, I believe. So you can go see a lot of pictures of manatees, of course, but also there's pretty good updates about where we're at and what we're doing. And it is a cool window into like the day in the life of a biologist who's restoring seagrass. So that's our links.
Cool. seaandshoreline.com. And we'll put some links in the show notes as well. Katie, thank you so much for this. And Michelle, if you're listening, thank you for the connection. I believe it was Heather was on there as well. All kind of made this happen. And I'd love if you guys ever need someone to come out there and do video. That was the one thing that I thought was not lacking, but there could have been more of it. Like you said, you guys are doing some really cool stuff, and a lot of people don't even know about it. If you ever need someone to come out there and film, Justin and I are both good swimmers. We can lift at least 50 pounds over our heads. Let us know. We'd love to come out and film some of this and share all the cool things you guys are doing in both Lagoon and anywhere else. Let us know. It's an open invitation. Sea Shoreline. So
thank you so much. That's awesome. Like I said, I love having as many perspectives as possible on this. So that would be a great time.
cool. Hi, guys. Well, thank you so much. Make sure to leave a comment down below for Katie or anyone there at Scene Shoreline. And otherwise, we will talk to you on the next episode. Peace. We out.